Hi everybody, welcome back to Clay TV. So I'm sitting down at my wheel here. I'll turn the camera around, I'll show you the setup, what we have working. So here's my wheel setup. I typically have clay balls to the left, and then my bucket to the right. I keep my sponges in the bucket sometimes just to soak up some water, and then the tools I'll keep just off to the right hand side. Whatever works for you, works for you. And then that brick is just where I'm going to be setting my camera. So about wheels and how they're set up, right? The outlet, it plugs in over there. I try to keep it away from where water may get into the outlet, right? I'm right-footed, so I got my wheel on the right. You can move the wheel pedal to the left if that works for you. And we have controls over here. So this is power switch. If you could turn the wheels off every time you're done working, that would be appreciated. Click on, green light, it's good to go. These are the VL Whisper models from Shimpo that are really nice and quiet. Each wheel works well, right? We also have the Brents. It's kind of like the Cadillac of the pottery world. I love Brents. I personally own Brents and use them. They're set up similarly to on-off switch, okay? And these little toggles right here change the direction of the wheel. So they have them labeled here on the Brent models. This is for counterclockwise, right? And this is clockwise. Typically, people throw in a counterclockwise direction. The Shimpos also have that here too, which they label as forward and reverse. Counterclockwise is reverse, which should be forward, right? But I think that's why they have it labeled as reverse. So reverse clockwise, counterclockwise, forward, go figure, right? The other thing is the splash pan. These can give you a little bit of a headache when trying to put them back together. They have these flanges that are underneath here, and they have to hook in. Otherwise, they'll rest on top and slide around on the wheel as it's going. So when you are putting these splash pans together, if you pull up a little bit and push forward, it should lock into place a little easier. This one is a little backwards. I like putting this side in first, and then this other side will go in on the other spot, right? But to each their own, whatever works, works, right? Now I managed to get my wire tools. Best laid plans of potters and artists. Okay, so you might notice we're just going to be throwing straight on the wheel head. There's an item that's called bats that you can place screw pins down and put your bat on top, and you can remove the work that way. we'll be working with a small enough amount of clay that we don't need bats, and it actually takes up more space than is needed for 1 cup. So I don't use bats with making small work, right? So to prep, we want to take our small sponge and clean the surface of the wheel head. So you get the wheel going, your damp sponge, just wipe off the wheel head, any excess dust or anything like that you may have. And we'll grab our ball of clay, okay? Even though this is just wedged, I like to make balls of clay by patting it, you know, hitting one side and then squeezing the other with my left hand. Just helps shape it and form it. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? So from here, I can take my clay and throw it down on the wheel head just a little bit. If it's not perfectly centered, it's okay. You know, you can use these concentric circles as a guide to get this in to center as much as possible. I'll wiggle it back and forth with my hand and get it relatively centered, right? So from here, I'll take my finger and seal the bottom. If you get water that goes underneath the clay and the wheel, it will just slide right off, right? So, I'll take out the sponges from my water bucket just so that they're not in the way. So I just want you using your hands to feel the clay at first, and then we can work in throwing with the sponge. So a bit about stance. My arms can rest on the splash pans as you know, added force. This is stable, right? You can think about a triangle, right? So if this is the point of the triangle, these are my arms, and my body is the base of the triangle. So we want things to be really stable for centering, because you're going to be adding pressure and holding that pressure to center the clay, right? A bit about the wheels. I raised them up a little bit. I gave them a little bit of legs so that you're up straight. You know, your back isn't hunched over, and you know, you're not in awkward position when you're making work, because you know, the potter stance can be all hunched over like this, and it's not good for your neck, it's not good for your shoulders, it's definitely not good for your lower back. So if you can be a little bit more open, with your chest up, your back straight, and your feet planted on the ground, it's better for you ergonomically, right? So with just a little bit of water, I'll use my hand to lift up the water with my fingertips and take what I need for centering, right? The water is the oil to my car engine, right? I want this to have viscosity on it so that things run between my fingers smoothly. when the clay begins to stick, when it feels sticky and dry and your hand starts to drag, need a little bit more water, right? Just grab a little bit and add it to your clay, right? Just kind of feel it out right now. Add a little bit of pressure, see if you can change the shape of your ball. You can see I'm getting a little bit of movement here, right? And then looking at my palm, you can see where the pressure is, right? It's right along the pad of my palm and across the face of my hand, right? I'm going to add a little bit more water. And a little bit of pressure changes the shape of the clay. So for centering, there's a couple ways to do that. The easiest way that I've found to teach beginners centering is having both hands on opposite sides of the clay, on the left side and right side. You can squeeze together, right? So I'm squeezing together from the bottom and to the top, and I'm holding in place that pressure, and it begins to center, right? So the idea of centering is that not only are you centering the outside of the clay body, but that long extended hold of constant pressure will center the middle of the clay. So you can hold in place, and what I'm looking for is a nice mounded clay base, right? Little hill, right? So that's an intro to centering. The next technique that of centering that I want you guys to work on is called cone wedging. Cone wedging does the same thing as the wedging demonstration as the ram's head, that it aligns the clay molecules together to become easily or more easily workable, right? So cone wedging is adding pressure from the bottom between my two hands and squeezing up to the top and making a cone, right? So what's this doing? It's centering the mass of clay on the base to the top, and then you repeat the step by compressing down. So using the pads of my hands, I'll compress down, and so with that action, compressing from the base, working up to the top and back down again, is centering the mass of clay in the middle. And that's our goal, right? You can feel when the clay isn't centered, like the little bumps and movements that you can see right now, like the clay is becoming more centered. It's not perfectly centered. right? And you can really feel it with your hands, the clay ridges that are out of center, okay? But that's okay, right? Like, one, things don't have to be perfectly centered to throw. And, you know, I will show you that as we move on. So compressing, squeezing from the base, working your way up top, and feel this out, you know. If you add too much pressure, you can rip the clay in half. Like, it can twist on itself and tear, and it will most likely happen to most of you, if not all of you, right? I know I still do it. You know, I push the clay a little bit too hard, and it tears in the center when I'm centering. So I changed my hand position right here. This is how I typically center, is I compress with my left hand, and I come on top and compress down with my right. So, you know, I'll press in with my left, and that pressure will make a cone. It'll push that clay upwards, and with my right hand, I compress down, right? And then after a while, you'll begin to feel out the clay, and you can press in, compress down fairly quickly, and then compress with both top and side pressure, and then lightly pull away, right? So thinking about physics, thinking about Newton's laws, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. As I push into the clay is also pushing back into me, right? So if I am pushing into the clay and I suddenly take my hands off, that clay will push back and move off of center, right? So think about the pressure that you add, the pressure that you need to add, and the pressure that's pushing back at you, right? There's a lot of little nuanced movements that happen with centering, right? Same thing goes with adding too much pressure. If I add too much pressure, throws it off center, right? So say this is, you know, I need to add 5 pounds of pressure to center this. If I add 7 pounds of pressure, I'll push right past that limit, and that throws it off center, right? It's a funny concept to think about when you're learning. You're only working on certain areas of the clay body as opposed to the whole thing itself. So with my left hand, I'm only working on the left side of the centered clay, right? And it affects everything that goes around it. So as you can see, I'm grabbing just little bits of water bit by bit with my right hand. If you're left-handed, you know, grab with your left. And more that I have people coming through the studio these days, a lot more people feel like going the opposite way on the wheel works best for them to center. So before changing positions, it's easy to get clay all over the place. This is why I have the large sponge. I can wipe off my hand as needed and switch the direction of the wheel without getting too much clay, right? So now we're going the opposite way. So same exact thing. My right hand will be centering. Right? So for right-handed people, like I'm right-handed, I'll center with my left, and then I'll move over to the right-hand side to finish the throwing. Some right-handed people feel better about working on the right-hand side of the wheel. Okay? If you can, try working counterclockwise first, unless you know that you need to work clockwise. Okay? Okay. So that's centering, right? We'll begin the next video with throwing a cylinder, right? And we'll begin right after this.